Hello, everyone. Good evening. Got to find my notes. Good evening and welcome to the second annual Montana Free Press Fest. We are thrilled to bring the festival here to Bozeman at the Montana State University. In fact, we wouldn't be here without the tremendous support of Montana State University and the great teams that we've been working with over the last few months to bring this to this campus. Sponsorship from MSU made it possible for this event to be free. I gotta put my glasses on. So it's free to all of you in this room tonight, thanks to the generous support and sponsorship of Montana State University. We also want to extend our thanks to additional sponsors of Free Press Fest, including the Lark Hotel in downtown Bozeman, J.P. Morgan Chase, the Pew Charitable Trust, and the University of Montana School of Journalism. This year, Free Press Fest is providing live captioning for all our sessions. You can tune in to the live captions on your mobile device or by scanning the CODA QR code on the screen at each session you attend. I don't know where that code is, but I'm sure it will appear. So I also want to extend a warm thank you to Montana State University President Brock Tessman and the incredible team here. I also want to thank President Tessman's predecessor, President Waded Cruzado and her team. A special shout out to Tracy Ellig for inviting us to Bozeman for this year's event. So thank you very much to the university leadership. And now, with no further ado, I want to welcome the new president of Montana State University, Brock Tessman, to the stage.
All right. Thank you so much, John, to you and your team, certainly our staff helped make tonight possible. To all those in attendance, welcome to Montana State University. Welcome to the 2025 Free Press Fest. I am so happy that we're able to host this event. I am so privileged and honored to serve as the 13th president of Montana State University. And I want to echo one of the big thanks that John provided already, and that's thanks to Tracy Ellig, who is in the audience. Tracy, I think that your work with John and team helped make tonight possible, and I thank you very much for that. And you know, Tracy, I have not seen you much since your retirement, and I'm sad about that. I also know that I'm going to see you soon because you're going to come to me and you're going to critique the way that I deliver these comments tonight and have plenty of helpful feedback for me. No, Tracy, so good to see you, and thank you again for your role in making tonight possible. John, again, thanks to the Free Press. We're so happy to host the event at Montana State University. I want to be forthright. I have scripted here a dig at the Free Press and the logo. I was going to say, gosh, the least you could have done is to have blue and gold up there, but actually you anticipated that, and I love to see this connection between the Montana Free Press and Montana State University. The event over the next couple of days, and in fact, the Montana Free Press is a great match with almost everything we stand for at Montana State University. I mean, think about the essence of these organizations. From what I understand, and I know the Free Press a little bit, nonprofit, nonpartisan, powered by the public with a mission to serve an audience in all corners of the state of Montana and beyond. Think about Montana State University, Montana's land-grant institution, nonprofit, nonpartisan, grateful and powered by support from taxpayers across the state of Montana, and committed as the land-grant institution to serving students from all walks of life in every corner of our state. The Free Press and MSU are such a great match for that reason. Thank you. I think about accessibility. And I think about the business model of the Free Press as far as I understand it. I think about the business model of Montana State University, so committed to high quality, affordable public higher education on this campus. The Free Press, so committed to a highly accessible model to any reader, any platform, at any time. And I mention accessibility in particular in the context of this evening. John, you mentioned it already. One of the things I'm most proud of is that this event is being delivered free to any and all comers, easy enough registration. Financial costs are not a barrier, or financial barriers are not a reason to stay away from the Free Press, just like financial barriers are not a reason to say no to Montana State University. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of quality. Accessibility is something, but it's nothing without a quality product. And I know there is a commitment at the Free Press to providing high quality, engaging, transformational reporting, shining a spotlight on the truth, engaging audience members and informing them to become well-equipped, powerful citizens in their state, in our democracy. Montana State University, we're growing. Love our growth in numbers, but quality comes first. And we have professors, we have staff who are deeply committed to providing a high-quality academic experience, professional development, and a high-quality opportunity to develop as a citizen. We're developing civic strength at Montana State University. And I did mention growth. Gosh, we've been out of the state for a few years. Every time I turn around and check out the Free Press, I see the growth of the organization. And it could be a new substantial area of focus, more coverage of statewide education or politics. It could be increased emphasis on local reporting. It's so impressive to see growth at the Montana Free Press. And today, because I'm president of Montana State University, I need to highlight this. Today, we were so honored to issue our report on our fall census, our count of our student body at the start of our fall semester. And we have a record high enrollment, a record high full-time enrollment, a record high in on-time graduation rates, a record high in retention rates, a record high in students who are beneficiaries of veterans benefits, a record high in terms of enrollment. I think that speaks volume about the quality I referred to earlier. And in the midst of that growth, of course, we'll continue to focus on very high-quality events like the Free Press Fest. The Free Press Fest itself, where else in Montana, dare I say, where else in the region can we see a program like we see over the next few days? It is truly outstanding. And I just run my finger over the program, and every single day I see something that connects very closely with work that's happening on our campus, services we provide on our campus, research that's being engaged in on our campus. For example, tonight we're talking about the politics of truth, building credibility around the intelligence community specifically, but I think more largely building credibility and public trust in public organizations. Well, that may very well be true for intelligence organizations in the United States. It's also so relevant for public higher education and public education in general at this moment. The imperative of regaining public trust and continuing to build credibility. We've deserved it from day one, but there are ways in which we can improve our communication with the public and help reestablish credibility. I think about tomorrow in our panel on youth newsrooms. I think it's called Gen Z Bringing Hope to the Field of Journalism. And right behind my lovely wife, Kristen, who is certainly a big part of this evening, I want to point out Amanda Fulton, our editor-in-chief of the MSU Exponent. You're a panelist at the Free Press Fest talking about our paper on our campus. So there's a connection there. I think about the last day of the program and the panel that will address wildfire and ways to promote sort of sustainable communities in the West, in the midst of challenges presented by wildfire. Just last week, I had a chance to visit in the Norm Asbjornson Hall, a statewide gathering of a $20 million project. MSU is a lead institution. It's called Smart Fires. It's about the scientific impact, the societal impact. It's about the educational opportunity associated with prescribed fires in the state of Montana and beyond. So I look at the program in the Free Press Fest, and I see Montana State all over the program. And for that reason, we're also a great match and a great host for the event this year. In perhaps most importantly, and I'll end on a bit of a philosophical note here, I think that Montana State University, as a flagship institution in the state of Montana, as a premier public institution of higher education in the state, in the region, and across the country, we share something very special with not just the Montana Free Press, but all those who are committed to promoting a free and fair press in the United States. We share core values. We're sort of attached at the hip with those core values. And I think about the imperative of open exchange in a free marketplace of ideas, the pursuit of truth, the development of civic strength through information and education. Those shared commitments, we could spend the whole night talking about them. I could, at least. I don't have that opportunity, maybe next year, John, but I don't have that opportunity this evening. But I do highlight the similarity in those core values. And because I'm a good president, and I prepare for moments like this, I went back and I took a peek at the opening remarks from last year's event. Happened to be delivered by my colleague west of here. Great job, President Bodnar, with those comments, by the way. I took a peek at those comments, and President Bodnar said, it's September of 2024. We live in particularly challenging times, a time of upheaval, tension, political polarization. Never has it been more important for the free press and public education to join forces. And he was correct in his statement. But I fast forward 12 months or so from that time, and I think, oh my. If there was ever a time where that statement was even more valid, it is September of 2025. And I think about this in terms of the way that our state, our country, approaches our future. If we approach our future with a sense of resignation, a sense that our best days as a state, our best days as a country are behind us, and that our prime strategy moving forward is one of sort of managed decline. Well, if that's the case, then we as Montanans, as Americans, I think we might find better investments of our time, our treasure, our passion, our energy. There might be better investments than investing in a free press or a vibrant, flourishing public education system. But if instead we think about ourselves in 2025 and we see ourselves as part of this grand American experiment, and we see the best, the brightest, the most brilliant days of that experiment ahead of us, and we acknowledge that we have bumps, we have challenges, both in our rearview mirror and in front of us right now today, but we see that brilliant path ahead. If that is the kind of state, if that is the kind of country that we are, then I can think of no better investment for those of us in this room, for our friends, for our neighbors, for our communities in Montana and beyond, than an investment in a free and fair press, in a vibrant, flourishing public education system. For me, if faced with that choice between a sort of dark, managed decline and a difficult but bright and brilliant path, I will lead toward the bright and brilliant path. And I believe that you all, by showing up here tonight, also believe in that bright and brilliant path. You'll have a chance to learn. You'll have a chance to engage as part of the Free Press Fest. I hope we have key takeaways. I hope we have challenging debates, civil debates, as a result of the programming here. But I know that it'll be a valuable experience for all of us. Look, I think that there are some Bobcats in the room. Again, I'm happy to see some of our current students here. I know there are Bobcat alumni in the room. I'm sure there are alumni from other states or other universities in our state and from other states beyond Montana. But regardless of that, know that we are so proud to be hosting this event at MSU, your state's university, your land-grant university, your university. Thank you again for the time this evening. Enjoy the rest of tonight and the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Tessman. That was an incredible welcome. We're so thrilled to be here, and thank you for those kind words. A few years ago, I was standing on this stage with distinguished MSU alum Sarah Vowell. legendary State House reporter Chuck Johnson, who was later awarded an honorary doctorate at this esteemed university. And we were here on this stage marking the 50th anniversary of Montana's Constitutional Convention. Half a century after 100 Montanans from all walks of life, political stripes, gathered at the Capitol to chart a new course for our state, that document remains one of the most forward-looking in the nation. How many state constitutions get a round of applause at their mere mention? At its heart are the guaranteed freedoms that make gatherings like this possible. Freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and freedom of the press. As President Tessman said, we should not take those rights for granted. We should not look at just the past, but towards the future. These rights exist only if we, the people, are willing to exercise them and defend them. So that's one of the reasons why we created this festival. We're living in a time of extreme political division and deep distrust of politicians, of the media, of each other. But we need these pillars of a free society. We need our elected representatives to work together in service of their constituents. We need the news media to communicate facts and keep us informed. And we need each other. One thing I've learned over 20 years of journalism in the state is that we share far more in common than our differences would suggest. Time after time, I've seen Montanans from different backgrounds, different beliefs, different attitudes work together to do good and necessary work. I've witnessed off-roaders spring into action to rescue an injured rock climber. I met Hutterites for the first time when they stopped on an early fall blizzard to dig out a stranded truck from a snowbank up Deep Creek. I've covered fierce political debates in the halls of the state capitol, and then later spotted those same opponents sharing a drink. That's the Montana spirit we're leaning into here. Over the next few days, you'll hear conversations that might challenge you. Tonight, celebrated author and journalist Tim Weiner and former Senator Jon Tester will describe how political pressures are undermining national intelligence work and why trustworthy information about the increasingly complex world that we live in is essential to preserving American democracy. Over the next 2 days, we'll look at the changing face of Montana's economy, the future of our vast public lands, the threats facing journalism, and the resilience of communities vulnerable to wildfire. We'll learn about the future of media from youth-led newsrooms. We'll listen to conversations about fiction's uncanny ability to reveal hard truths. And we'll hear the voices of Montanans who share hard-earned lessons about freedom and justice. You may not agree with everything you hear at Free Press Fest, and that's not the point. The point is to listen, to participate, and consider your community's ideas about issues that affect all of us. Montana is stronger when we set aside ideology in pursuit of solutions, like those Constitutional Convention delegates did more than 50 years ago. Free Press Fest is about reminding ourselves that a healthy society depends on access to reliable information, free and open debate, and respect for each other, even when we disagree. On behalf of the staff and board of Montana Free Press, thank you to our sponsors, our volunteers, and all the partners who are helping to bring this event to life. And most of all, thank you for being here and taking part in the conversations that will help shape Montana's future. So let's get started. Tonight's talk will begin with a short address from distinguished author, and will continue as a panel talk when we welcome a very special guest. So without further ado, it's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening. Tim Weiner has won the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award for his reporting and writing on American intelligence and national security. His latest book, The Mission, The CIA in the 21st Century, hit number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. As a reporter at the New York Times from 1993 to 2009, Tim covered the CIA in Washington, D.C., chronicling the struggles of American intelligence from the fall of the Soviet Union to the War on Terror. As a foreign correspondent at the Times, he reported on wars, conflicts and crises in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sudan, and many other nations. Prior to that, he worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer from 1982 to 1992, where he covered the fall of Philippine dictator Ferdinand Marcos and traveled to Afghanistan during the Soviet occupation to report on the CIA's weapons pipeline to Afghan guerrillas. At the Kansas City Times from 81 to 82, he was part of a team awarded the Pulitzer Prize for uncovering the cause of the Hyatt Hotel disaster, the collapse of a newly constructed building that killed 114 people. Tim is a 1978 graduate of Columbia University, where he majored in history, and in 1979, he graduated from the Columbia School of Journalism. He lives in Brooklyn with his wife, Kate Doyle, an expert in human rights. Please join me in opening our second annual Montana Free Press Fest with a warm welcome for Mr. Tim Weiner.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really eager to get into it with the Honorable Jon Tester, and I will try to make my remarks as brief as possible. So the first time I set foot in Montana was the summer of 1971. I was hitchhiking across the country, and you know, people pick you up. Almost always people pick you up. Did they pick you up out of the milk of human kindness? No. They picked you up because they were bored. It's a big country. It's a long way from Indianapolis to Salt Lake City. But I was going through Montana on my way to the West Coast. And people picked you up, and they wanted to talk. And they wanted to talk about the most fascinating thing in the world, which was themselves, correct. But often as not, they were kind of inarticulate, so I had to ask them questions and draw them out and get them to talk about themselves, tell me about themselves. And of course, I had no idea what I was doing. I was 15 years old, but I was learning how to do an interview. And that's really where I started to become a reporter, listening to stories about people's lives. Fast forward 15 years, I'm a reporter at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I get it in my head that I want to go to Afghanistan, which was then under Soviet occupation. It was the first of many trips I would make to Afghanistan. I think every reporter, every young diplomat, every human rights worker, every person who works for a non-governmental organization, they go to a country in their 20s and they fall in love and it breaks their heart and they keep going back. Afghanistan was my country. So before I went, how old am I now? I'm now 30. Not knowing any better, I called up the Central Intelligence Agency. And I said, hello, they have a public information office, by the way. They have always had a public information office. It's sort of like the Maytag repairman some days. And I said, hello, the fellow's name was Pete Ernest. Hello, Mr. Ernest. I am about to go to Afghanistan to write about this enormous covert program you have of sending hundreds of millions of dollars of weapons every year to the Afghan Mujahideen to help them kill the godless Soviet invaders of their country. Can I have a briefing? And he said, absolutely not, and hung up the phone. So off I went to Afghanistan, backpacking with the Mujahideen, the Holy Warriors. It was a fascinating trip. I got the two stories I set out to get, which were, one, the introduction of an American weapon, the Stinger anti-aircraft missile, into the battle. First time that American weapons had been used to kill Soviets in the entire history of the Cold War. And second, the fact that the CIA's weapons pipeline was leaking badly. So I came back, got my notebooks, and I hadn't been back in Washington for more than a day when the phone rings. Guess who? It's my new best friend from the CIA, Peter Ernest. Hey, Tim, how are you? I said, great. How was your trip? Unbelievable, I said. How would you like to come in for that briefing now? And I said, I'd be delighted. So the CIA sits off in the woodlands, now suburbanized, of Virginia, about 7 miles from the White House. So I drive up in my battered old Chevette, park in the parking lot, walk into the lobby, and on the left-hand wall, engraved in big bas-relief letters, from the Gospel of John, John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And like Jeff Lebowski said, that's really interesting, man. I said, that is really interesting. So off I went to my briefing. It was 4 people from the Director of Operations, the clandestine service of spies, and I had 100 questions for them, and they had one question for me. What's it like over there? And they'd never been within a country mile of Afghanistan. It was too dangerous for CIA to go in there. You know, God forbid they would be captured or killed by the Soviets. So then I go down the elevator, I look over my right-hand shoulder at the Gospel of John, and I knew that I was going to cover the CIA, like I had covered the cops in the courts as a cub reporter. And so I did, and it's kind of been my life's work. I've now written 4 books about American national security. So as I dug into the history of the CIA, I saw that there were several crucial junctures at which we as a nation had to decide how we were going to run a secret intelligence service in an open, democratic society. And as I dug in, I found that while I was hitchhiking back and forth in the country, having a great time in my youth, first President Johnson and then President Nixon ordered the CIA to spy on Americans in violation of its charter. The CIA has no police powers in this country. You want to spy on Americans, call on the FBI and get a search warrant. A disastrous decision by both those presidents. Now, President Johnson's rationale was, and of course, he taped himself in the Oval Office, just like Richard Nixon did, thank God for posterity, for journalists, historians. He called in the head of the CIA, Richard Helms, J. Edgar Hoover from the FBI, and the head of the National Security Agency, the Electronic Eavesdropping Foreign Intelligence Service, and he said, I'm ordering you to spy on the left in this country, on the civil rights movement and on the anti-war movement. And he said, and I quote, the communists are taking over our nation right now, and I'm not going to let it happen. Nixon had a slightly different perspective. He wanted to spy on the entire left, including the Democratic Party. His enemies, as you'll remember, Nixon had a substantial enemies list. And the CIA kept spying on Americans on his orders. We would know nothing about this had not an extremely cantankerous reporter from the New York Times named Seymour Hersh ferreted this story out, confronted the then head of the CIA in December 1974, and followed it up with a 6-column headline, you know, CIA spied on anti-war movement. This led immediately to the Church Committee hearings. The Senate, 50 years ago, conducted a year-long investigation in 75 and 76 of what the CIA and the FBI had actually been doing during the Cold War in this country. It was because of Hersh's revelations that those hearings took place. And at the outset, the man who was running the investigation, Senator Frank Church of Idaho, some of you may remember him, wondered aloud as to whether, and I quote, the CIA has been a rogue elephant, trampling people and nations. That was at the outset. At the end of the hearings, Senator Church knew, and the committee's reporting was kind of circumspect on this, but he knew. The CIA wasn't a rogue elephant. When the elephant trampled people and nations, it wasn't the elephant's fault. It was the fault of the mahout, the elephant driver. And the elephant driver was the President of the United States. I mean, do you really think that a couple of CIA officers were sitting around Miami, kind of a Mad Men scene, you know, in 1960, on their second or third martinis, and one of them said, "Hey, I got a good idea. Let's go kill Fidel Castro." That didn't happen. It was President Eisenhower, President Kennedy, and President Kennedy's young brother Bobby, the Attorney General of the United States, who wanted that to happen. A secret intelligence service under the command of a lawless president is a very dangerous thing. We know this from other countries. And we know it is the case in the United States. What is happening today with the CIA, the FBI, the Directorate of National Intelligence, and the Pentagon is that the President of the United States has put crackpots and fools in charge. And what they are doing is systemically destroying these institutions. Why would the president want this to happen? The president sees the CIA as the capital of the deep state. There is no deep state. He sees it as the core of this conspiracy of spies and soldiers and intelligence analysts who reported back 9 years ago that Vladimir Putin's intelligence services monkey-wrenched our election in 2016 to denigrate Hillary Clinton and support Donald Trump. This is not a debatable point. There are no two sides on this. This happened. And Donald Trump has been trying for the last 9 years to plunge this inconvenient fact down the memory hole, to erase it, just as he erased the criminal convictions of the January 6th insurrectionists. At the CIA, the director, John Radcliffe, a MAGA congressman whom Trump liked for his commentary on Fox News, has done the following. This is a short list of what's happening right now. He fired everybody the CIA hired to be spies, Americans, of course, in 2023 and 2024 because they were Biden hires. He has eliminated the CIA's long-standing, going back to the 80s, policy of diversity in hiring for the clandestine service, for the spy service. Why is diversity in hiring a good idea at the CIA? Well, on the sound principle that sending an all-white cadre out to spy in China or Pakistan or Sudan is terrible tradecraft. You want people who can swim in the sea of the people. You want people who speak the languages and understand the cultures of the country they're spying upon. Same goes for the analysts. Okay, diversity was the CIA's superpower. It's how they don't get caught. And perhaps most destructive, on orders from the president, the director of CIA has imposed ideological purity tests on everybody in a senior position, everybody under consideration for promotion, everybody sort of at the senior level of the spy service and the analytical branch. People have to ask their questions. Who did you vote for in the 2024 election? What did you think of the January 6th insurrection? Who really won the 2020 election? Well, this is no way to run a spy service. Ideology is the enemy of intelligence. If you are an ideologue, you don't need intelligence. Your mind's made up. You don't need spies to steal secrets from overseas. You don't need analysts to tell you what's going on in the world. Why does this matter to you as American citizens a fair distance from Washington, D.C.? The ideological purity tests being imposed at the world's premier intelligence service are now spreading into the general population. It is now deemed treasonous to criticize the President of the United States. Furthermore, to have a MAGA acolyte running the CIA, a right-wing podcaster running or ruining the FBI by literally dismantling its national security and intelligence divisions, a conspiracy theorist and a Putin fan, Tulsi Gabbard, is the czarina of American intelligence. She oversees the bureaucracy that manages American intelligence. Pentagon, former Fox News host, who says we are about lethality, not legality, as the United States murders people on the high seas in the Caribbean. These people are amateurs. And their amateurs, their ideological blinders increase the risks of a catastrophic systemic intelligence failure. Won't be like last time. That the Russian intelligence services and the Chinese intelligence services, as we speak, are penetrating the body politic of the United States. That is a real national security threat. And though they work in different ways, the Chinese want to know us, the Russians just want to screw us. They are working toward the same goal, which is the fall of American democracy. We can't let that happen. The only reason we know about most of this stuff is a cantankerous press. You wouldn't know about this stuff if the New York Times and the Washington Post, God save it, and independent journalists weren't talking to people in the intelligence community and figuring out what's really going on. And we have a need to know this. James Madison once said, a popular government, and by that he meant government of the people, by the people, for the people. A popular government without popular information is but a prelude to a tragedy or a farce, perhaps both. And a free people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power of information. Here, people? That's why reporters do their work, despised as they are by those in power. That's why, I keep talking to people in the intelligence community to find out what's going on. Because I hope that the work I've done in the mission, which is the history of the CIA in the 21st century, and the work that my colleagues continue to do, will arm the people with the power of information and the power to be their own governors. Thanks.
Why don't you go ahead and sit in the middle, or either way.
We're now going to enter the conversation portion of this tonight's event. The man to the left of me probably doesn't need much of an introduction. I'm former Senator, third-generation farmer from Big Sandy, Mr. Jon Tester. right, gentlemen, you both have mics next to you. You might need to turn them on when it's time to talk. Thank you both for being here. I do want to make a note. We do have copies of Tim's book, The Mission, for sale over at the merch
Highly
table.
recommend it.
It's an excellent book. I was joking earlier. Somebody asked me, is it a good book? And I said, define good. It's an excellent book. It's an excellent piece of journalism and history. It's a page turner, but it isn't the kind of thing that makes you sleep easy at night. I'll be honest about that. Well, Tim, I want to just start out real quick. In your book, the following epigraph opens the text. We must have the greatest immorality, and we must have the greatest morality. Hugh Cunningham, Director of Training, Central Intelligence Agency. Why did you choose that particular quote to set the tone for the book? And what does Cunningham's paradoxical statement reveal about the CIA's mission today?
I think it gets to the heart of what espionage is. And the CIA was created in 1947 to conduct espionage with an analytical cadre to sift through what spies could discover about what was going on behind the Iron Curtain, and to inform the president on a daily basis. All Harry Truman really wanted was a newspaper to tell him about what was going on in the world. That all changed quite quickly as the leaders of the State Department and the Pentagon ordered the CIA to become a paramilitary organization conducting covert operations, to roll back the Soviets and fight fire with fire against Russian imperialism. The heart and soul of espionage is the recruitment of a foreigner to become a spy for the United States. Okay. The CIA officer, an American, recruits a foreigner to become an agent for the CIA. To commit treason against his own country or to betray his organization. Betrayal is at the heart of this, and trust is at the heart of it. The recruited agent trusts his or her life to the CIA officer. And people do this for a lot of different reasons to become spies for the United States. Some are motivated by money or revenge or, a one-way ticket out of their country to the United States. But many of them came to the CIA over the 21st century. They were Russians, they were Iranians, they were Chinese, and a handful were North Koreans, because they wanted to change the world around them. And because they still believed that the United States stood for freedom and democracy. So there is the morality and the immorality of espionage. The trouble today is that the lights on the shining city on the hill are going out. And it is difficult to convince a Russian or a Chinese or an Iranian that we do still stand for freedom and democracy, because the President of the United States has joined the authoritarian axis.
Senator Tester, there aren't a lot of city lights where you are. And I imagine a lot of your neighbors in rural Montana don't wake up first thing in the morning asking themselves, gee, I wonder what the CIA's up to. But you served 18 years in the United States Senate. From your perspective, in a rural state, far from Washington, D.C., and the foreign capitals and war zones around the world, how do you make the case that the integrity of our intelligence agencies matter to the daily lives of people in a state like Montana?
John, first of all, thank you guys for the warm reception. I really, really appreciate it. And there's plenty of bright lights around me, but not as many as there used to be, which is too bad. I think I think everybody understands, I don't care if you live in urban America or rural America, that this is a very dangerous world we live in. And I think that everybody, regardless of political ilk, understand that there are certain countries, and I hope I'm not giving too much credit here, but there are certain countries out there that would like to see democracy cease to exist in their country. And I think the only way you can prevent their influences on us is to be able to have good intelligence to be able to stop them from doing the things they want to do before they do them. Now, I agree with Tim. I think that this is it's hard to make the case because all but my neighbors, but I think a handful, voted for the president. And I'm not being critical. It's just that it's really hard. It's really hard to convince them, short of something really bad happening. And I don't want anything bad happening. I don't think anybody in this group wants anything bad happening. But if you take a look at the Signal Gate thing, which I think you guys are familiar with, where they were running a military action and they were putting classified information on an unclassified platform, which, by the way, is an incredible no-no. And why Marco Rubio didn't stop this is beyond me, because anybody who ever sits on the Intelligence, Armed Services, or Defense Committee knows that this is not what you need to be doing. But the justification of that was, well, geez, the mission went off fine, so don't worry about it. When in fact, anybody that knows much about particularly China is they don't use the information right away. If they have an outlet to get information, they'll keep gathering that information and gather as much as they can until they get enough where they think they can do something with it, and then and only then will they act. So, I mean, I think to your question, John, I think you just have to point out to folks what they already know, that this is a dangerous world, that there are folks that want to take us over economically and militarily, and that one of the many keys that we have, that's our important keys, is our intelligence community and the kind of information that's gathered by these folks. Now, I never have met any of the folks in the intelligence community from other countries, but I've met many of the leaders in these agencies, and I'm just going to tell you, I have never been around a more capable group of people. And I don't know if they've all gone or just a good portion of them are gone, but those folks were shit hot good. And I think it behooves everybody in the country, whether in rural America or urban America, that we have that kind of intelligence gathering capability, because I think it's just critically important.
Senator Tester, you rode into office in 2006, I think in part because of the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration's mishandling, misuse of intelligence as it relates to weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Colin Powell made a very emphatic case to the United States that they knew for a fact that Saddam had them. We now know he did not. And when you were campaigning in 2006, I recall this was a big issue in that race, and you were among many Democrats who rode into office, I think in large part on the Bush administration's misuse of that intelligence. So fast forward 19 years, and you've been candid about your party's inability to connect with voters, particularly in rural areas. Why has the Democratic Party failed in recent years to convince Americans that it has a stronger plan to keep the country secure?
They haven't listened to me. No, look, I don't know. I mean, I really, if I had the answer to that question, I could probably solve the problem. But there is no doubt about that. I'm not being critical, I'm being honest. The Democratic Party is focused on issues that people don't vote on. It's not that they're not important issues, it's that people don't vote on those issues. And I think that I could go down the line, whether you're talking about climate change or how we're managing public lands, or whether you're talking about the intelligence community, or whether you're talking about military readiness, or whether you're talking about law enforcement, and the Democrats could make a hell of a case. But, and I think to this country's detriment, they haven't. And quite honestly, Congress has been AWOL for the last 9 months. And I don't think that that is what the framers had in mind. I think they put Article 1 in the Constitution as Article 1 for a good reason. And you know, there, just as kind of a sidebar that I think is pretty interesting, there's always these guys that say, you know, if you don't have a budget, you shouldn't get paid, Congress shouldn't get paid. I think if they don't read the Constitution, they shouldn't get paid. They should have to fill out a paper when it's done telling what it says. Because many of the folks that I served with wrap themselves in the Constitution, and then that's as far as they get. They forgot to read it. And so, look, it's a target-rich environment for folks out there. Is it easy politically to get your message out? Man, it's really tough with all the algorithms and all that stuff that's out there. But you can do it, and it takes a lot of work. And all you got to do is think about things that Americans and Montanans and rural America thinks about, and go out and talk to folks. And you got to show up. And that's it. I just want to close with one thing because I'm starting to get dirty looks on the left side of the room. I have a podcast with Maritza Giorgio called Grounded. and we talk about this kind of stuff on there with different folks. You know, one of the things you said, I don't mean to filibuster here, but I will for a second. One of the things,
Burn the right.
One of the things that you talked about, Tim, was how the president tends to migrate towards folks who are authoritarian.
This president.
Yeah, this president. And I'm going to tell you, Tom Friedman was on our podcast, and he said something that was very interesting that I never thought about, and you probably know Tom very, very well, Tim.
I knew him. We worked in the same office.
Yeah, but the truth is that he said this president looks at government from an Eastern standpoint, not a Western standpoint. And that's not being critical, that's just his view, and I think it's a pretty interesting observation. And I think it kind of goes contrary to what every other president before him has viewed, whether they're Democrat or Republican, you know, and how they've operated.
This question is for both of you. In an age of rapidly developing and advancing AI, biometrics, surveillance everywhere, is the CIA equipped in today's day and age for the future? What role can and should Congress play in making sure that it adapts, but adapts responsibly, if that's even possible?
The congressional committees, the so-called oversight committees that are supposed to ride herd on the intelligence services. Oversight has two meanings. It means to oversee and it means to overlook. They have fallen into the latter category of late. There was one old boy, who was it? Back in the 50s, who was chairman of the Armed Services Committee. He said, well, he was a Southerner. He said, well, you just have to, when it comes to CIA, you just have to close your eyes and take what's coming. That's where we are today. One of the reasons that it is very hard for this, and getting harder for the CIA to spy in places like China, is that 11 years ago, the Chinese intelligence services broke into the computer systems of the Federal Office of Personnel Management. That's the government's HR department. And they stole the personnel files on 22.5 million people who work or had worked for the US government going back to the start of this century, and 2 million people who worked in the intelligence community, including everybody who worked at the CIA, again going back to the start of the century, including their security clearance forms, which had passport information, fingerprint information, personal histories, and so forth. They took all that data, They cross-indexed it with the biometric data they had stolen from the world's airports. They gave it to Alibaba, the Chinese tech giant, to crunch. Alibaba took 90 days to do it. And today, and ever since, if you are a CIA officer at the luggage carousel in the airport for your new assignment in Beijing or Kuala Lumpur or Ouagadougou, where have you, likely it's not a Chinese intelligence officer who's going to come up to you at the luggage carousel and said, "Hey, Joe, how you doing? I know who you are." Most of the people the CIA trained and hired as spies in 2023 and 2024, those same people summarily, I'm talking about more than 1,000 people here, summarily dismissed by the CIA Director John Radcliffe, had trained up to work on China. And then John Radcliffe, head of the CIA, sent their names in an unclassified email to the White House. The Chinese can read the unclassified email systems of the White House and have been doing so since the Obama years. You want it darker, as Leonard Cohen once said? That's just a taste of where we're at.
Well, I think in the days of AI and biometrics and incredible technology that's beyond my ability to understand how the hell they do stuff, but they can spy in a state like Montana where you got Democrats, Republicans, all which are libertarians. Our freedom and privacy is pretty damn important. At least I hope it still is. And I think the only thing that is out there that stops a president or somebody that works in the service that gets kind of out of the queue is Congress's incredible and intense oversight. And if they don't do it, and they haven't been doing it, but if they don't do it, then it's a recipe for loss of privacy by law-abiding American citizens. And I can tell you that if it isn't done every day with direct communication by committee chairs and committees themselves and through the hearing process, it can get out of control.
It is not happening, and CIA Director Radcliffe has cut off, and Director of National Intelligence Gabbard have cut off intelligence briefings about the Russians to Congress.
Yeah, and the Russians bear watching, but the Chinese bear more watching.
We're going to have an opportunity here shortly for some audience questions. Do we have a mic in the... we'll get a mic circulating here. So if you have a question, raise your hand so we can get the mic in your direction. We'll take a few questions, and then we want to make sure, I've got a couple of announcements here. One, we want to make sure that you know that we will be having a reception immediately following this conversation behind that wall, I believe. So please stick around. Also, I was negligent in hastily introducing the senator, and I did not, as promised, plug the podcast. So thank you for bailing me out there.
It's not a problem. I'm always looking out for you, John. Can I just say something before we get to questions really quick? Because this has...
Sure, I do have one more question, though, but go ahead.
This has nothing to do with intel. It has everything to do with the press. Big kudos to you. Big kudos to everybody that works in the press. Without the press holding elected officials like I was accountable, they do whatever the hell they want. If they know that somebody's watching them, they act much more appropriately and much more accountability to the people they represent. We have seen a decline in press across this country, and Montana is no exception. And newspapers, TV stations, radio have been replaced by the internet. And we've got this damn podcast, so I guess just come to us instead of Walter Cronkite and you'll be okay. But the truth is, it's not healthy for a democracy. Without a vibrant press, without vibrant public education, as the president of the university said, it puts our democracy at risk. And make no mistake about it, I got elected to the state legislature in 98. I got elected to the U.S. Senate in 2006. It has changed dramatically in those 25 years, and not for the better. And so when John Adams and the folks that helped put this conference on do this kind of stuff, it's for us, it's not for them. It's to make sure that we get good information so that we can make good decisions, because you make shitty decisions if you got bad information. So we have good decisions, and we can make good information, make good decisions, whether that's talking to our elected officials in a public forum, which seldom happens because we need to fix Citizens United, or whether that's when you go to the ballot box. It's just really important.
You know, I was struck as I was reading this book, how often it felt familiar to me, in the sense that in many ways the job of a CIA analyst is similar to the job of a journalist. It's looking at the information, understanding what the facts are, reporting the facts, and analyzing them and making them available, but to the public. Whereas the CIA's job is to make that information available to the administration. One last question for, I think, both of you. Another thing that was really kind of, I was struck with this book is how much deceit is sort of a principle of espionage. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but this quote really stood out to me. It's from William Hood, who was a charter member of the CIA who spent 28 years running missions against the Soviets. This quote says, "Like war, spying is dirty business. Shed of all of its alleged glory, a soldier's job is to kill. Peel away the claptrap of espionage, and the spy's job is to betray trust." I read quotes like that, and as I've read this book and learned so much about how the CIA functions, given the political pressures, given the ways in which this agency has bent to the will of various presidents, given everything we discussed, secrecy, deception, political pressure, is the CIA really in the business of truth?
The CIA's mission, its highest mission, is to anticipate surprise, to look out over the horizon, and to see threats as they were occurring. The breakdown that is happening today, has happened in the last 8 months, is a speeded up version, a compressed version of what happened in the 1990s. The Soviet Union collapsed. The CIA's primary mission for the previous 45 years had been to go after the Soviet Union. And for much of throughout the Clinton administration, the top people at CIA, I was covering them on a daily basis then for the New York Times, were wondering aloud, wondering to me, what is the mission? Now that we've lost our great enemy, how can we be a great intelligence service without a great enemy? The CIA's budget, the entire intelligence community's budget, was cut by about 25% by President Clinton, a peace dividend that was never really reinvested. And the CIA dwindled, and its powers to anticipate surprise dwindled. Thousands and thousands of years of expertise and experience walked out the door because people said, okay, game over, we won. The question of what the mission was began to become clear in August 1998, when, from a distance of 3,000 miles from its base in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda attacked 2 American embassies at once in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. 2 at once isn't twice as hard, 2 at once is 100 times harder. I mean, in the exact minute. The head of the CIA, George Tenet, convened all the heads of the military and civilian intelligence services of this country, everybody, for a 3-day conference in the immediate aftermath of that attack, which killed 12 Americans in Nairobi, including 2 CIA officers, and 224 Kenyans. They put their heads together and they issued a then classified report which said unless the United States got its act together as a nation and strengthened its ability to collect and analyze intelligence, that the country was going to suffer a systemic, catastrophic intelligence failure, and the date of that report was September 11th, 1998. We are in much the same position today. Can you imagine what Donald Trump would do if this country were attacked again at home or abroad? He would declare martial law. He would probably cancel the next election. And he would truly rule as a dictator. That is what is at stake for every American in the crisis that has befallen our intelligence community in the last 8 months. Your freedom.
It can get darker.
So ask me the question again so I can kind of get it a little lighter. Are they in the business of truth?
You got it.
Yeah, so look, I always ask myself, depending on whatever agency you were in, and I was, in the end, I was chair of the Defense Appropriations Committee, so I got classified briefings with regularity about what was going on in the world and what other countries were up to. And quite honestly, I would always ask myself, are you being brainwashed by these folks, or is it actually the truth? Is there an agenda behind what they're saying, or is this really the truth? And I will tell you, I came to the conclusion in the end, and now I don't know what it's like anymore. You're covering it, but we really had, when I left, some of the finest people you could ever imagine. And I trusted them, and I believed they told us the truth. And the only agenda around what they were telling me was they wanted to keep this country safe. They didn't want another 9/11 happening. They didn't want a terrorist bombing in this country. They wanted to keep Americans safe. And they used some incredible technologies to do it that were just amazing. And I'm sure with the advent of AI now becoming more and more in their workplace, that they're even, well, they could be more impressive now than ever before. But I will go back to what Tim has talked about and what I talked about. Congress needs to do their job. They're not. They're just not doing their job. I talked to a guy this morning, because you guys know I farm, and I said, the price of winter wheat right now is $4.20 a bushel. And I said, none of my neighbors are going crazy. I said, if Biden was still in office, they'd be going nuts. And he said, if any president was in office besides this one, they'd be going nuts. I don't know what the hell's going on. But there has to be checks and balances, and there has to be accountability within our government, or we run the risk of losing the democracy.
So we'll take a few questions. I've got one right here in front. And please wait for the mic so everybody can hear your question, especially the speakers.
I'm a pro at this. So you were talking about the OPM leak in 2015, and I wonder if you've done any reporting on the breaches that have happened from Doge and their venture into OPM. Certainly there has been an incredible amount of information that's potentially vulnerable from that. And I would also say, Senator, I think to a degree we see ourselves as Republicans or Democrats first and not Americans first. And that ends up being a big issue.
I don't disagree with that at all. You're exactly right.
So the 20-something tech bros who were working for Elon Musk and Doge broke into the systems of the United States Treasury, the Office of Management and Budget, and the Office of Personnel Management, and secreted away information like details of the classified intelligence budget, how the CIA pays recruited foreign agents, and the like. These children are walking around with that information. They have a giant bullseye on their back of their t-shirts painted by the Chinese and Russian intelligence services. And if any of them has, oh, let's say, an animus toward the government of the United States, or a drug problem, or money problems, or anything like that, they are ripe for the plucking.
We had a couple of questions. Oh,
Yeah, Will Bolin, I'm in Helen, and I feel like I'm on another planet, and here's my problem. You're talking about China, and everybody's talking about China now as the biggest threat to global security. What I have seen, I'm a Vietnam-era veteran since Vietnam, looking back even into the 50s with the CIA coups in Iran, Guatemala, on and on, as they were overthrowing democratically elected governments. As we moved into the 80s and the butchery down in Guatemala and Nicaragua, which I was present for, hundreds of thousands of people were killed. Into the Iraq war lie where Colin Powell shoveled around that baking powder with Tenet right behind him doing his dirty deed. And I know that Colin Powell died in shame. Up through the present disaster in Gaza with American support. They couldn't be doing it without us. Ukraine, American guns. I mean, you look at this, there's millions of people dead on our watch. And so then I look at China, and China's trying to do a Belt and Road, through Shanghai all the way to Istanbul. They're doing economic development. Obviously, you know, cheap labor down in Africa.
Can you state your question in the form of a question, please?
Well, it's coming. Because, and it's very basic, and you get it already, how can you possibly point a finger at China when we have a road of death and destruction behind us as Americans to this day being shamed in Gaza, which is unbelievable in the world community that we allow that to happen, perpetuate it, are complicit in it, and we're keep pointing the finger at China. Say what?
The CIA is an executor of the foreign policy of the United States. It does what the president tells it to do. The mahout, the elephant driver. And the foreign policy of the United States has certainly been the source of death and destruction around the world. People point the finger at the CIA's terrible intelligence about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, and rightly so. But I tend to take the word of a CIA officer quoted in this book. By the way, this book is entirely on the record. There are no anonymous sources whatsoever. His name was Luis Rueda, and he was the author of the Covert Action Plan to overthrow Saddam without going to war. And he said, these people, meaning the Bush administration, these people would have gone to war in Iraq if Saddam had a rubber band and a paper clip to put your eye out. And that is the God's honest truth. So, and believe me, I mean, I am not a CIA fanboy. I am rightly typed as a critic of CIA. But when you talk about the crimes of the CIA, you are talking about the crimes of the President of the United States. And when things go wrong, as they so often do, the CIA gets it in the neck and the President says, who, me?
Yeah, I will approach it maybe from a little different angle. You know what the United States has done because we have a free and open society. If you know what China's done, you should be working for the CIA. because they do all sorts of stuff, particularly through the internet, particularly through, we'll call it domestic terrorism in this country that nobody knows about, but they do it, and they do a damn good job of it. And I won't get into the other things that they've done, the people they've killed throughout that time. Am I particularly proud of some of the things the U.S. has done? Absolutely not. We're not perfect in any stretch of the imagination, and I would never say that we are, but we're a hell of a lot better than China.
We'll take maybe 2 more questions.
Tim, you say that citizens should arm themselves with the power of information, but it appears that we are flooded with information, including misinformation and disinformation. All you have to do is think about Pizzagate, or January 6th, or QAnon, or anti-vaxxers, or they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. So what's our way forward? Because we have so much information in our pocket, and yet we're more dumb than ever. And so, like, as a communication specialist, how do I help people navigate the labyrinth of the internet, which has so much information, but it doesn't seem to have a lot of truth? And when 5 different people have 5 different versions of truth, like, how do we land on one?
MontanaFreePress.org, click sign up.
By definition, misinformation and disinformation are not information. They are lies. An autocrat, whether it be Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump, wants the citizenry to believe that there are no facts and there is no truth. And they might as well just give up and play video games because the truth is not out there. Okay. You teach communications? Okay. And the question is, how do you get people to away from the toxicity of lies and disinformation? Turn off your computer, for starters. Read a fucking book.
Or your Montana Free Press newsletter.
Or 2. And check out the New York Times. They're pretty good. Pardon me? Yeah, absolutely. And God bless National Public Radio. Support your local NPR station, people, because the President of the United States won't, or the Republican Congress.
We'll take one more. Let's get one from the front of the room here.
Could you speak to what Stephen Miller is talking about with Palantir and the other, some of the Israeli spy systems that he might use on the left and immigrants?
You want to take that first?
I would love to, but I try to not listen to what Stephen Miller says, so it's part of my own.
So saith the wise man. What Stephen Miller and the President of the United States and the Attorney General of the United States have done in the last few days is to, through intimidation, fear, and threats, convince people that they will lose their jobs, and some of that is happening, that they can be indicted for speaking their minds. And that is also a hallmark of an authoritarian society. Some of this is bluster. And some of it may come to pass. in when Presidents Johnson and Nixon set the CIA and the FBI out to uncover the source, the Kremlin and Beijing funding another mother for peace back in the 60s and 70s. And, the civil rights movement and the ACLU. What they were doing is a precursor to Trump threatening racketeering indictments against the Ford Foundation and the Open Society Foundation. For what? For underwriting liberal democratic society, free speech, and a free press. I don't think we should succumb to despair in the face of this. I don't, and I never have. We live in hope. And here's one reason I live in hope. My mother was born in Nuremberg, Germany, in 1924, 11 months after Henry Kissinger was born in the same neighborhood. I could always get Kissinger on the phone when I was at the New York Times by telling his secretary, please remind Dr. Kissinger that his father taught my uncle in the gymnasium. And he would get on the phone and say, yeah, Mr. Weiner, what do you want now? She and her mother were trapped in Vichy, Paris. She was 16, her mother was 50. And by the skin of their teeth, over the course of the next year and a half, they made it to Casablanca. And in March 1942, which, by the way, was the same month that Casablanca was being filmed in a back lot in Hollywood, and I first heard this story when I was 9. My mother and I were watching Casablanca on the TV, and that great scene where the Nazis get up and sing the Waffenheim, and everybody else gets up and sings the Marseillaise. She burst into tears. I had never seen my mother cry. And when the movie was over, she told me the story. She got the second to last boat that ever crossed the Atlantic with German Jewish refugees. And it was the second to last boat because J. Edgar Hoover convinced FDR that the boats would be seated with Nazi spies instead of terrified refugees. As they were crossing the Atlantic, the first night out, my mother was 17. She looked up at the night sky and she said, thank you for saving my life, and I will try to live a life of purpose and help people. They spent 2 years in the refugee camp in Havana, the Discornia camp. They were paroled into the United States, and my mother heard about this program for young refugee women, and she was graduated from the class of 1945 at Smith College. How can you not live in hope?
I like ending on a message of hope. Senator Tester, Tim, thank you both for being here tonight. This is a lively discussion on an important topic. Thank you again so much to our gracious hosts here at Montana State University for hosting this 3-day event. Tonight is just the start. Tomorrow we'll be back at 10 a.m. with opening remarks, and we will have I'm really excited to have Maggie McGuane with her father, Tom McGuane, in conversation, maybe on a little bit of a lighter subject. We'll have it start the day off with a conversation about how art and fiction can tell us truths about ourselves here in Montana. So really excited to get this kicked off. Thank you both for such an incredible conversation. And with that, we hope everybody will stick around and join us for some drinks and refreshments and carry on the conversation. Thanks, everybody.